On today's World Insight, 2 COVID response surveys, 2 starkly different rankings. The U.S. on top of a recent Bloomberg Covid Resilience Ranking, while China places ahead of the U.S. in a Pew Research Covid survey. What do the numbers tell us? And a closer look at potential World Heritage sites as the UNESCO panel convenes in Fuzhou. What does it take to make it to the prestigious World Heritage list? Answers from a ranking UNESCO executive.
Outstanding universal value is for all of us around the world, and all of us have a moral duty to protect.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. Bloomberg's latest COVID resilience ranking has raised eyebrows around the world. The U.S., with over 10,000 new confirmed cases daily, was rated as the best performer, while China ended up 8th in the ranking. The Chinese Foreign Ministry on Monday questioned that ranking's credibility, saying it fell way short of respecting facts, science, and lives. Meanwhile, in the Pew Research ranking released in June, China scored higher marks for handling the pandemic than the U.S. did. These results were based on data gathered from surveys in 12 countries, while for Bloomberg's ranking, indicators such as infections are not included. Lockdowns and border control have been used as negative indicators. Of course, these are just the numbers given out by research data and also by news agencies. Whether they're accurate or not, that's another question. But certainly, the debate about who is doing a better job has been with us for a long time. Let's loop in our panelists for their thoughts. For more discussion, joining us from Washington, D.C., Dr. Kate Tulenko, CEO of Corvus Health, a global health advisory firm in New York, Jeff Schlegelmelk, Director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness of the Earth Institute at Columbia University in Beijing, Hai Fang, Professor in China Center for Health Development Studies from Peking University, last but not least in Nanjing, Wu Zhiwei, Director for the Center of Public Health Research, Medical School of Nanjing University. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Is it too early, Professor Wu, to say who is doing a good job as we are seeing Delta variants become the biggest concern for the world now, and we still do not know how much vaccines could work?
A couple of issues we have to be very clear that the current vaccine basically provided the protections against hospitalization and severe diseases, and also preventing the death caused by COVID-19. It doesn't really basically based on the preventing the new infections. So we have to be extremely cautious that when the pandemic is still going on around the world, that all the proper public health approach should still be implemented before we do see a clear sign that the disease is going down. So this is something that everybody has to bear in mind.
Too early to celebrate, Dr. Tulenko?
Yes, it definitely is. It's very concerning that with very large epidemics of the COVID virus in Indonesia, India, and elsewhere, we'll probably see more variants of the virus that are even more infectious and perhaps even more deadly. So that is a concern. And as far as who the current winners might be, in my opinion, the current winner is Chile. You have a middle-income country that's managed to vaccinate over 70% of its population.
There are several so-called standards that are being used by one survey or another about how to measure who is the so-called the current successor. But that's, to me, a little bit interesting. I don't know how scientific that is. Meanwhile, how much is agreed upon by the international community. without really going into details because it's really not that meaningful, let me have more expert views from all of you. Jeff, tell me more about how you think about the current uncertainty we're still facing and the realities we need to face.
There's still a lot of unknowns. There's vaccines out there, but I think the other word that I would use to describe what's going on is unevenness. It's very uneven. We have some cohorts of populations in some countries that are very vaccinated. We have others that are both vaccinated and have strong adherence to social distancing measures. And then other areas are opening up and have lower vaccination rates, and we're seeing outbreaks around the world. And so that is the phase we're in now, a lot of unevenness. And with that unevenness comes uncertainty.
Professor Fang, also about that to you, how do you see the current situation?
Collaborate together, all the world, all the countries, and we have to make sure that we have the same standard for the prevention and control, and also we have to provide vaccines to those countries without resources, particularly for those kind of developing countries and also low and middle income countries. A lot of countries with a lot of production for the vaccines, but the manufacturer may not be able to export those kind of vaccine to some other countries. So this is the biggest issue actually facing the world.
And also with the Delta variant, it seems that those countries that already have quite some vaccination also need extra shots for their population, usually the third shot. So what kind of situation overall are we facing, Professor Wu, even on the issue of vaccination?
For the Delta variant, we do know that its transmission actually is a high efficiency. Basically means that it's actually going through individuals a lot faster and more effective than the older ones. We don't really know right now whether it's more pathogenic, but this is something actually we have to leave to the medical professionals to determine to see how this variant would cause diseases. The issue is that the vaccine so far, we do have some evidence that it is still effective against the Delta variant, but how effective it's still a question.
Yeah,
So
we don't have
why,
those numbers at this moment at all. We still have to wait.
Right.
It is already a reality that science is at least a few steps behind the reality, because that's the nature of it, isn't it, Dr. Tulenko?
Yes, it's moving very fast. And you had mentioned the Bloomberg resilience score, and they recently made a change to it. And the U.S. actually is now above New Zealand, which had a very small outbreak. When I look at their criteria, it's really skewed towards countries that relied on vaccines as part of their control. So that's really going to skew it towards high-income countries that didn't do early lockdowns. And so I don't see that as a very good measure. I mean, look at the U.S., despite the fact that the U.S. basically paid for two of the main vaccines, we've only vaccinated 55% of our adults. Canada, China, Israel, Malta, UK have vaccinated more folks than the U.S. And we've just seen the lead vaccine expert in the state of Tennessee be fired because she wanted to promote August Vaccine Awareness Month. So we still have huge challenges in the U.S., and I would not put it as first in the ranks of COVID resiliency.
Let me move on to another topic that is about how to open the border, what extent to open the border, how much should we allow people, from the health authorities' perspective, people to travel freely, including those who are vaccinated or not vaccinated. Tell me more about what are some of the factors health authorities or health experts like you are looking at when you are trying to make that decision.
One of the first things I would look at is how economically dependent they are on that travel. Like, you have countries in the Caribbean who are highly dependent on tourism, and you can't go on vacation via Zoom. So you have to go there in person. So for that type of country, I probably would advise them to open their borders and be very strict about the criteria for people entering, either that they have to be vaccinated or they have to have a negative test before they leave and a negative test on arrival. You can also go the Bhutan route, which for their tourists, they charge think $500 to enter the country. So it's just a different approach to tourism and a different way of raising revenues, so that if you do have an outbreak, you now have funds to help address it. So so that's the economic aspect. Most countries, such as the UK, they're not really dependent on tourism, and most business visits can actually be done via video conference. It doesn't have to be done in person. Now, there are, of course, some countries that rely on huge movements of labor across the border every day.
Certainly, there are a lot of different circumstances. So, Professor Wu, your thoughts?
We have to look at the epidemiological issues and all new cases actually popping up in countries, neighboring countries. The other thing, I think it's also very important is countries' capability in responding to the new surge of the COVID-19. So this is something we have seen in China, that when we have a small cluster of infections, then local government could respond very quickly and pull down, get that under control. So this is something actually the multiple factors should be put into the considerations.
Whether this approach will be sustainable. I mean, you could see the huge resources being put into the utmost attention on every, single case. So will this be sustainable? So far it is. But what about in the future?
In the long run, it's going to be a tremendous resources and economic pain. But this is something actually I think we have to do it in the short term to pull down the virus, and then the economic activities could come back to normal.
For the case of China, in Wuhan, that was quite a dramatic situation at the very beginning. But now the rest of the country certainly have long graduated from the fear of an epidemic. But for the United States, we saw, the death rate, the death number that has been very tragic. But now with vaccination rate up, what is likely to be the approach? Well, at the same time, learning the lessons of earlier times of not paying much attention or not having enough prevention and control measures.
The reality is that, a lot of the fear and anxiety we had, very early on in the pandemic, some folks still carry with and others don't, but maybe should have a little bit more concern. But look, economies are opening up and people are moving around now. Vaccine rates aren't where they probably should be to have this level of movement and activity. There's still a lot of susceptible populations, and we're seeing outbreaks in areas with low vaccination rates. I think we'll continue to see that. But at the same time, I don't think that there's much of an appetite for people to go back into restricted movement, whether the math works or not with regard to the epidemiology. So the reality here is that we have to keep pushing for vaccinations. We have to take targeted interventions where we can, but whether the United States or the rest of the world, people are tired of being locked up, and whether it's in their best interests or not, it's going to be very, very hard to re-implement movement restriction at this point.
Professor Fang, I'm sure you are aware of the upcoming Tokyo Olympic Games. Of course, right now, there is already quite a situation in Tokyo in terms of the rise of number of cases, confirmed ones. And the Olympic Committee, together with the organizing committee of the game, already decided that they are not going to have, in most cases, audience sitting in the stadium watching. But still, that is quite an event to watch. How do you see the signals, the result of the Tokyo game might send to the rest of the world? Professor?
I think Tokyo should be fine as long as there are no international audience from other country. Even though there are some local infections, particularly in Tokyo or in the area of Tokyo. However, I think the connections between the local people in Japan and the athletes from other countries are very limited. So in these
But what about athletes among themselves?
Definitely, that is possible, but before they come to Tokyo, they should be tested and also vaccinated. So they should be fairly safe.
Professor Wu, the Beijing Olympic Games upcoming in the winter time early next year, that is also a tricky one because not many people expected that the COVID-19 would last in such a severity for such a long time, and we see things are likely to continue for some time. So, Professor Wu, as a health expert, how do you see this, and how is this providing you with another perspective watching the Tokyo game?
Well, actually, I think we are pretty confident right now because the overall new cases are very low, and
you mean in
so
China?
Far experience in China, yes, and our experience in responding to new infections surges are very effective, and it's unlikely that there is going to be a large surge of infections in China. So I think this kind of public health policies and the responding mechanisms should be effective in dealing with the COVID-19 in the upcoming Olympic Games in China.
When you say it should be sufficient, you are saying between the athletes or the delegation and the Chinese public, or among the delegation themselves, or?
Basically, I mean, it's in the audience, but dealing with the athletes actually is more complicated because you can't expect athletes to wear face masks and doing too much restraints on their activities. I think this is something actually we could, such as increase in the screening and the monitoring of the COVID-19, things like that. I think, in a way that we could prevent the infections.
We suffered over the past year, shall we put it that way, tremendously from COVID-19 worldwide. Then we learned a lesson somewhat, and also vaccines came into being with the support of science and also the scientists who are working around the clock. And now we seem to be in a better position, and yet there's Delta variant, and we don't know what's next. So to you, ladies and gentlemen, what are some of the factors you are going to watch very closely as we are deciding the approaches we're going to take as a whole in the world? Dr. Tulenko, shall I invite the expertise from the lady first?
Yes, the most important thing I will be watching is the emergence of new variants that might be more infectious and more deadly. I think that's the most important thing. Second most important is how quickly we can ramp up production of the vaccine. I don't think nearly enough effort has been put into it. And Europe has to release the patents on the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines.
Professor Schlegelmilch, please.
Yeah, I think vaccination rates and where places are vaccinated and how those vaccines are holding up is really going to be a key determinant. The other piece that I'm really keeping a very close eye on is not just infection rates, but also death rates and hospitalization rates, because if we can get those down as low as possible, that's ultimately the end goal, is to keep people from getting very sick and dying from this. And that'll also come both from vaccinations as well as new treatments and better treatment methods around the world. I
see. Professor Wu Zhiwei.
Well, this virus apparently is highly resilient. It's new variants coming out very quickly, so this is going to become a new normal, and we have to live with that. So the vaccination, actually, as the previous two guests mentioned, that has to be improved, particularly in the low vaccinated nations. It's very important that we increase the vaccination in those populations. The other thing is that we need to increase the international collaboration to prevent the further pandemic.
Professor Fang.
I think the most important thing for us is we have to cooperate together, and then we have to work together instead of criticisms. In other words, we have to build the community of health for mankind. And if we can work together, I think that will be possible for us to control and prevent COVID-19 in the near future.
We hope politics will not drag us down in this overall test of our ability this time. Thank you so much, all of you. Kate Tulenko, Jeff Schlegelmilch, Hai Fang, Wu Zhiwei. Really appreciate it. And you're watching World Insight. Coming up, a closer look at potential World Heritage sites as UNESCO panel convenes in Fuzhou later this week. What does it take to make it to the prestigious World Heritage list? We'll gather answers from a ranking UNESCO executive. right after this break.
Outstanding universal value is for all of us around the world, and all of us have a moral duty to protect.
Welcome back. This is World Insight, and I'm Tian Wei. The extended 44th session of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee will be held virtually from July the 16th to the 31st in Fuzhou, the capital of eastern China's Fujian province. The committee is responsible for carrying out the World Heritage Convention and eventually has the final say on whether a place ends up in the World Heritage List. This year, the committee will review China's Quanzhou project. At present, China has a total of 55 World Heritage sites, tied for first place with Italy. So exactly what makes a World Heritage site, and how are we working together to protect these historic places? Earlier, I spoke to Shahbaz Khan, the director of the UNESCO Regional Science Bureau for Asia and Pacific. Let's listen in.
I want to tell you about this very special Hongfeng Lake.
Okay, in
It's
Guizhou.
In Guizhou,
Oh.
very beautiful, close to Guiyang City. And of course, it's a wonderful location in the
Yes.
south of China. It has some very important rivers, but very importantly, it supplies water to more than 3 million people.
Okay.
So that's where we need to understand many things. There are more than 500 research papers which have been written on special aspects which are important for the world, how we link water and vegetation. And here you see
look
me,
at that.
those young children, very beautiful. They are
Local
happy
kids.
with this area
Yes.
and the local communities.
And they're all looking like this. This is with a heart.
Yeah, they show their heart and they want to link with UNESCO. So they take care of this area by removing all those housing and industry which was polluting.
Yeah.
Now it's a wonderful site with amazing vegetation and best water quality.
I see.
And that's where how I'm working with Mayor
locals?
Wang and with the local stakeholders, with China,
Yeah.
Railway Real Estate. We are going to set up an education center there.
Good for you.
And very importantly, this will become a demonstration project, like one of the 30 only in the world. How do we conserve our water quality and water supply to supply to all those people who need water, but how we can learn from here and help other countries.
Good for you.
Like shared benefits and people-to-people contact through water management, through intangible culture as well.
The reason I'm here has a lot to do with the World Heritage Conference. Many are very exciting about that. Tell me more about what is likely to be the focus of the conference this time.
World Heritage is a very special part of UNESCO's work. As we know, we are looking for sites with outstanding universal value. And it's the 44th session of the World Heritage Committee. One thing very special, of course, is it is in Fuzhou in China from 16th of July to 31st of July. Also, it's a very special time for the world. We are coming through a pandemic, COVID-19, and we are also looking very carefully into our sustainable development goals and how culture can play a very important role.
Even your ties. It's a mixture of all the colors representing different sustainable development goals.
Yeah, because world is colorful, world is multicultural, world has many interesting things to offer from our spiritual and cultural aspects. So that's why this very special World Heritage Committee will be making very important decisions, how we move forward from here, how we link with sustainable development goals. And new sites will be also there, which will be carefully considered by the World Heritage Committee with our advisory bodies. And there may be some important tough decisions for the conservation and preservation, what is needed now and what is needed for future.
Dr. Khan, there has been some debates about what exactly is endangered World Heritage sites and why they are important. We look at the news these days. It's interesting that people are mixing politics and even geopolitics with that concept. Tell me more about your understanding.
Very important to note that the World Heritage Committee represents the interests of member states of UNESCO with our advisory bodies. To be in danger is not necessarily something bad. Maybe it can help us look into what is very important and is being threatened, like very special species, special flora, special fauna, or our very special heritage sites from a cultural point of view. So how do we prepare some kind of corrective actions, working very closely with the state party, and very important, to bring the international attention and cooperation from around the world. So it can have both sides.
So do member countries of your organization be able to individually or collectively impose which is likely to be endangered cultural heritage sites onto the UNESCO committee?
UNESCO does not represent only one member state. We bring the consensus from all our member states, and the World Heritage Committee is very capably supported by our advisory bodies. So certainly it's a consensus after looking into facts and figures and understanding what is in danger in terms of the outstanding universal value. And the outstanding universal value of a site is not only for that particular member state or the state party. Outstanding universal value is for all of us around the world. And all of us have a moral duty to protect and to care for our future generations. So that's why it's not a decision of one particular state party. It is something to be considered collectively with independent advice from the advisory bodies. So, and there has been cases where there has been a lot of improvement which has been made, funds have been mobilized, experts have added value to the processes.
So actually it could rally the morale and at the same time be able to rally the resources put together in order to bring it back to not endangered. That's the point.
Absolutely. And the local people play their own role, the local governments play their own role. Like, I give you one example of World Heritage. It's called the Tropical Rainforest Heritage of Sumatra. I was working in Indonesia before coming here to China. Very beautiful site, wonderful place, both in terms of the special species which are there. For example, orangutans, very special to all of us in the world. And we want to make sure our children and their children can also see them. But their habitat in danger because of many activities like mining, deforestation, or other activities which can endanger their habitat. So how can we conserve their outstanding universal value for that particular site? Indonesian government is doing so many interesting things and very committed to make sure that what we do there, it helps the whole world. So international bodies like the World Heritage Committee, working with the Indonesian government, working with IUCN, working with the governors, the local government. So it created a momentum to understand what are the critical issues, what can be the corrective actions, and then you bring a process of monitoring and evaluation, so over a period of time, how this site can be out of danger.
Tell me more about what you saw with China's cultural heritage sites. How do you see this process of conservation and also protection over more than a decade already?
Sure. I've been a traveler in China for more than 20 years.
Good for you.
I'm a waterman, so wherever water goes. But at the same time, I have learned so many interesting things, like the grottos, the Buddhas of Datong, very, very special. And I see the link.
The Datong Grottos.
The Datong Grottos, World Heritage Site. Very amazing sculpture there. But also I can link it with Bamiyan in Afghanistan. And I can link them also to Borobudur in Indonesia. But it's not about the monuments themselves. It's the philosophy. It's our understanding over a period of time from where did we come, where we are, and where we should go into future, and how we can have intercultural dialogue for creating a better future for all, and how do we have better tolerance for each other, how do we have our ability to understand different cultures, different religions, and how do we create peace in the minds of men and women. So that's why all these places are so important and so interesting, and they represent our outstanding universal values. Those locations not just because of the monuments, but because of all the philosophies and ideas and how we have traveled through history and where we are going.
And they're especially relevant these days, one would argue, because we are in the middle of a pandemic. We have ever increasingly complicated geopolitics, just to say the least. And we seem to be in face of new technologies that's likely to transform our life. So what is that ultimate intellectual wisdom that we could hold in hand?
We have come through a time where we have realized a lot more economic development. We have a lot more money in our hands, but we have a lot more spiritual problems as well. We need to find solutions within ourselves and with people around us. So that's where the moral, the spiritual and cultural side has become a lot more important. We need shared benefits among ourselves, but the shared benefits are not only economic benefits. How do we understand each other? How do we live in more harmony and peace? Harmony and peace among ourselves, harmony and peace with the environment, and harmony with our spiritual side. So the role of culture has become even more interesting and important. That's where we have not only the tangible heritage, but also intangible heritage. I recently went to Guiyang and I saw some of the most interesting ethnic practices there on embroidery. The special dong song, so interesting, full of energy, and it links us with the local people there. Then the 24 terms of the solar system, which is basically a very wonderful way, scientifically guiding us about our environment, about our agriculture, about our lives. So people have thought through these issues over a very long period of time. And if the present technology with the social media and all of us on the computers and on our connections on our mobile phones, we may forget all about what we have learned over time.
The other thing about the cultural heritage sites and intangible cultural heritage assets is whether there is going to be overexploited. For example, when tourism happens, how do you see the current situation today, Dr. Khan? In China, for example.
In China, of course, China is a very special country because it has 55 World Heritage Sites. Yes. It has 41 very amazing geoparks, 34 man and biosphere sites, and 42 intangible heritage. All of us want to go and see those places, meet those people.
You have very busy schedule.
Yes, but we have to link with those people and understand them. But unfortunately, there are examples when people go and they are so many, they want to be there. They can annoy local people, first of all. I'll give you the example of Bali. The Bali rice terraces is also UNESCO's World Heritage. So do real people really benefit when these people come? Mm-hmm. When the tourists come, do they really respect the local culture, local custom, the local beliefs? Are there too many and they are going to destroy the environment? Right. Like Angkor Wat, for example, in Siem Reap. Because so many tourists come, and same like Borobudur in Yogyakarta, so many tourists come, hotels are full, lot more water is needed, we are pumping a lot of groundwater, the cities are sinking, the poor people cannot get water in their wells. So this is just one example. But at the same time, if we are not responsible, we will create new environmental problems. We may destroy the sites which we love so much. That's why responsible, sustainable tourism is very important. Mm-hmm. And now in this era, I would say ecotourism is very important. In China, we have the eco-civilization concept. How do we bring these cultural, environmental, economic, and local people's aspects together so that when we go to a site, we're not just looking at the monument. We go and understand from where all this happened, what are the important issues for the local people, how can we become part of understanding of what's going on here, and how do we actually connect from that place to the world. And that's where, while we enjoy those wonderful places, we take care of them.
Tell me more about which sites would you like to visit as soon as possible, for example, in China. I know you are in charge not only China, but also, DPRK and some of the other, Mongolia as well. But just in China, where do you want to go the most?
I want to see, of course, our very special sites like Huangshan is very, very special area because it has all the designations. And we are going to have our next staff retreat very soon over there. I want all my staff to know our UNESCO values. Chiangmai-shan I visited many years ago.
Oh, yes, beautiful.
And
in northeastern part of China.
Northeastern part of China, very beautiful. Every step you go, you feel like you are getting a self-achievement. And after all those thousands and steps, when you see the lake in front of you, it looks so wonderful and beautiful. And of course, it also links us with another very important country, a neighbor of China, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So it actually creates us this feeling, we are together, we are connected, we have a very special place, Earth, and there is no second Earth. We have to take care of it. We have to take care of our natural and cultural heritage. So I want to go back to Chiangmai-shan again.
And it's especially good to visit during the summertime.
Absolutely. The sooner the better.
I hope you will have your dream realized.
I'm sure. Because we are also organizing special kind of, you can say, the movement for the young people. So we have been working with young people in
Chiangmai-shan?
In Chiangmai-shan.
Oh, how?
How can they actually look into the environmental issues? How can they be part of the solutions? Within Nanjing City, we have a peace forum, which is actually bringing these different aspects together. Yes. So there are a lot of young people interested in UNESCO's work. We have a major project with Mercedes-Benz where we are mobilizing local communities to take care of intangible heritage at the same time. Like very special species, for example, panda in Chengdu, I would love to go back and see, like Yan City. Very, very special places, but at the same time, they can help us find solutions for rural revitalization and how can we now take our economy forward, not by the GDP, but with more satisfaction for life and more respect for our spiritual and cultural values.
Beautifully said. Dr. Khan, another issue, very important, COP15, to be held in Yunnan. Just think about your term. There are so many things happening during your clock, right? Yeah. And that is going to be about biodiversity. It coincides with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It coincides with, what China also see as its ultimate goal. How do you see the COP15 is being prepared so far? It's coming in October.
Something really very important for us. Of course, this is a time when we are thinking about how do we accelerate SDGs. Sustainable Development Goals cannot be accelerated unless we bring special emphasis on biodiversity and environment. So this will give us a very special momentum, what we need. What would be our targets for next 10 years for biodiversity? How we actually take care of the environment while we have more green development. A green development which is taking care of environment, social and economic, but at the same time I would say with our cultural and spiritual values. Right. So that's where we have to carefully think about so many systems, ecosystems are becoming extinct. There are so many species which are disappearing because we are using the resources of this very fast. So that's why coming to Kunming, we have to very carefully look into what the world is going to do together, like with more than 2,000 UNESCO sites around the world, what we have learned from there, what we have learned from our link between culture and environment, what we have learned in a special country like China with 100 years of CPC. This was a wonderful time for us to celebrate that so many people have been lifted out of poverty. And at the same time, we have a very special understanding of our rivers. There is more and better understanding of the protected areas.
But people would argue, Dr. Khan, at a time when we're struggling with all the priorities, the pandemic is one of those, right? And geopolitics, once again, is one of those. How much real attention will be devoted to biodiversity besides this conference, which many around the world are preparing for it, but Will it really be a sustainable topic?
I think the time cannot be better. This is my belief as an environmental scientist. During COVID, which is still during in many countries, and some countries have been very successful in vaccinating and going through some of the difficult times, this is the first time people have realized, sitting in their homes, quarantined, not able to move, the world has come to a standstill, and we have started to understand what have we done wrong, how can we work better, how can we learn from our past and move forward. And environment has come out very strong. There are, of course, our very special link with our environment. We want to go to those places. We do not want to be sitting still. How do we actually go for new health opportunities, for example? How do we link with the traditional medicines which come from our very special plants and our very special places? But very importantly, what it would mean if those species go extinct. So COVID has brought a very new emphasis on environment and our link with our spiritual and cultural aspects. So that's why I think this time there may be a lot more interest at the public level. It's not just a convention of parties where some people come and talk about the diplomatic, bureaucratic issues. It will affect each and every one of us, and we need a pathway to Kunming, bringing young people, bringing people who are struggling with their life on a day-to-day basis, and very importantly, how do we actually conserve, protect, and upscale these ideas to the level of the nations.
UNESCO Executive on Cultural Heritage Sites. And that's all we have for today. If you'd like to see more Search World Insight, check out our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.